In this video, I will be discussing the idea of Japanese female identity in regards to the Japanese traditional gender role defined by Ryosai Kenbo, as well as examining the role of women starting from the Edo period to the post-war era. One of the main focuses will be the study of visual culture, specifically shoujo manga and anime that changes the traditional gender role. Finally, I hope to challenge Murakami Takashi's belief that the kawaii phenomenon actually does not make Japan look weak or effeminate. Identity is defined as the qualities, beliefs, etc. that make a particular person or group different from others. What does this mean for Japanese women? Why does it make them different? In order to understand these questions, it is important to look at the history of women, starting with the Edo period. During this time, society was separated into multiple hierarchies, such as the merchants, peasants, and samurai, to name a few. Women's role in the Edo period were defined by Confucian standards, at least that was true for the upper class. Confucian teachings for women were developed through the distribution of educational guides. One of these guides was known as the Onna Daigaku Takarabako, or in English, the Treasure Box of Greater Learning for Women. Inside this guide are a code of morals for women that are based on the thoughts of Zhu Zi, a Neo-Confucian scholar. Things found inside the guide include practicing filial piety towards the father and mother before marriage, and the father-in-law and the mother-in-law after marriage. The woman must look towards her husband as Lord and always serve him. A woman must always keep strict watch over her own behavior. For example, she must be awake before her husband, and she must go to sleep after her husband is asleep. Finally, the woman must keep her husband's household in proper order. Takarabako was created from the demands of families who had daughters and wanted them to be educated. Families would also have their daughters sent to private schools or to daimyo households to teach them how to perform their future duties as wives and mothers. From the findings of Tadashi Takagi, it has been found that peasant women had the ability to initiate divorce. This is through the use of a miku dari han, and it gave both husband and wife the right to remarry. The divorce proceedings did not have the cause for divorce nor any criticism of either party. Both parties had to submit a type of document called the Rienjo Kari Itsatsu, or a receipt for the miku dari han. This changed during the Meiji Restoration for the middle class. Women's identity was not just about being a filial wife, but the woman was expected to follow the idea of good wife, wise mother, also known as Ryosai Kenbo. The Meiji Restoration itself was a time of advancement and evolution for Japanese society, for the males in royalty at least. The emperor and his wife were symbols of Japanese advancement in the world. The old dress of past courts were changed from Chinese dresses to Western suits, and male hair was cut in a Western style. The empress dressed up as a Western beauty, and age-old traditions such as blackening of teeth and eyebrow shaving were removed from society. The Japanese nation wanted a way to keep their traditions alive, and the women of the middle class became that tradition. The tradition of Ryosai Kenbo speaks of women staying home and taking care of the house, and bearing children for the nation. Education for good wives and wise mothers was the cornerstone to education for middle-class females after 1899, because it was based on the idea that properly educated women could prepare children to be good subjects of the emperor by instilling diligence, loyalty, and patriotism. The middle-class women's public image was one who attended girls' higher school in order to gain the necessary education to raise a family, using the postal savings system and spending an appropriate amount of time on organized philanthropic and patriotic activities, which will be discussed later. The clothing attire of the middle-class females were also a part of what gave the idea of Japaneseness. Japaneseness can be defined as the ideal woman in regards to the Ryosai Kenbo and one who preserves Japanese culture. For middle-class women, the traditional clothing was the kimono. After the Meiji period, there is a time where middle-class women are starting to advance outside of the idea of Ryosai Kenbo. These women were known as Shokugyo Fujin. Since this was a fairly new idea for middle-class women, many of them expressed doubts to their new role as paid employees, and that they had the desire to cultivate their accomplishments as a future housewife, shufu, to fulfill their vocation as women. It was due to the rise of Shokugyo Fujin and other events such as the Great Kanto earthquake that led to the kimono being branded as traditional clothing and Western clothing taking its place as the dominant fashion. More will be discussed about the kimono in a bit. One of the more recent events in changing women's identity is the passing of the 1985 Equal Employment Opportunity Law. From its original passage into law, there are 5 areas of employment that were addressed. They were recruitment and hiring, job assignment and promotion, education and training, employee benefits, and mandatory retirement age, retirement, and dismissal. In regards to education, training, employment benefits, and mandatory retirement age, employers are not allowed to discriminate for any reason against women. Of course, with the prospect of working outside the home, setting comes into play with the relationship between the public and private sphere. It is important to note that the public sphere could also mean the working sphere, while the private sphere means the domestic sphere. Each of these spheres are dominated by a specific gender, males for working and females for domestic. But what are the reasons for these marginalized spheres? 3 things led to the marginalization of women and men. These 3 things were Ryosai Kenbo, the cult of domesticity, which is a Western belief similar to the morals that are found in Takarabako, and modern workplace practices. As early as the Meiji period, women were expected to be placed inside their home and have no rights. In the 1970s, Western scholars named Paulson J., Powers J., and Libra E. concluded that the Japanese marriage was a socially valued female career in which a woman finds self-fulfillment, called ukigai, in the home. Included inside the private sphere is an idea known as shakai, which refers to the environment surrounding each family. Examples of these are neighborhoods, communities, or school districts. This eventually gave women the power to organize and led to events such as the 1970s feminist movement. This will be discussed later on with its impact on visual culture. When the 1985 Equal Employment Opportunity Law was passed, it did give women the right to have the same rights and advantages that men had, but women themselves were still affected by sexual harassment and were forced to more often rely on the court system for reparations. The causation of this event is from the career track system. The career track system was split into 2 distinct rows, managerial track and the clerical track. In the managerial track, employees are associated with paid vacations, relocations, and advances throughout the corporate ladder. The clerical track usually involves no overtime commitment, but it doesn't allow for vertical advancement through the company. This track is mostly for women, and most women in this track, when they are working, they can be considered office ladies, and they are usually considered as a gift to the company. This track also assumes that women will quit as soon as they become married or they have children. After the children are grown up, the women may come back to the job and continue working. This gives the distinct impression of an M-shaped career path. If a female was part of the managerial track, if they had kids or became married, they were usually pressured by their bosses to quit and to perform their duty to society. In regards to popular culture, one artist stands above the rest because of his development of the art style superflat. This was Murakami's attempt to reanimate pre-westernized, heavily indigenous Japanese artistic perspective in forms that simultaneously accommodate a thoroughly westernized popular culture. This means Murakami was trying to have a culture that is strictly Japanese without any Western, European, or American influence, but at the same time it can be recognized in Japanese society today as culture that is mixed with Western influences. As I said before, Murakami Takahashi has beliefs that the kawaii phenomenon is in response to Japan's defeat in World War II and the nuclear bombings that ended it. From an interpreter, Murakami stated that the condition of the country and people were neutered and domesticated. I propose that is false, because the kawaii phenomenon and the popularity for anime and manga combined to create Japan's soft power. Joseph Nye defines soft power as the ability of a country to persuade others to do what it wants without force or coercion. The famous Japanese newspaper Asahi Shimbun in 2007 commented that Japan's economic power has peaked and Japan is now focused on polishing its soft power. Of course, Murakami brings a valid point, that because of the kawaii idea, Japan is weak. But if we look towards visual culture, starting from the Edo period, moving into the post-war era, we can see women advancing in society. Edo period visual culture can be defined mostly through kabuki and ukiyo paintings, or woodblock paintings. Murakami's art is influenced from Edo painters such as Kano, Sansetsu, Ito, Jakuchu, and Katsuhika Hokusai, by their techniques of using mobility of the gaze. This can be seen through the woodblock print characters who seem to stare off into the distance. Along with the gaze of the characters depicted on woodblock prints, many of the characters have androgynous faces. This is especially true for Murakami's My Lonesome Cowboy and Hiropan statues. As I have mentioned in Identity, the kimono was a major component for what the ideal image of a Japanese female should be. Towards the end of the Meiji period, the kimono became a traditional garment to be worn during special events such as the coming-of-age ceremony and weddings. While the kimono was becoming an obsolete choice of clothing, Western clothing was thriving in Japan because of women's lifestyle magazines that would show Western fashion for the Shokugyo Fujin. In 1944, there were only 4 magazines designated for women. They were Fujin Karabu, Ladies Club, Shinjoin, New Women's Space, Nippon Fujin, Japanese Lady, and Shufu no Tomo, the Ladies' Journal of Housekeeping. After the end of the war, Shufu no Tomo started working with the GHQ and SCAP, which was an organization that was created to keep tabs on media that was released in Japan. Many of the articles in Shufu showcased the ordinary American lifestyle for women. This was described as real-life experience from the authors, or they strictly followed particular aspects of American life, such as nursing or interior design. Along with these women lifestyle magazines, many magazine publishers started focusing on Japanese comics, known as manga. In the 1960s, much of the manga for girls was created by male artists who wrote what females were expected to be, and female artists would not come around until the 1970s. A popular mangaka known by the name of Osamu Tezuka released a shoujo manga called Ribbon no Kishi, Princess Knight. Princess Knight is about a baby who is born with a girl's soul and a male's soul. When she fights, she becomes more masculine, and when she is with her mother, she becomes more feminine. Throughout the first half of the manga, it starts with an angel named Tink. After he gives Sapphire an extra heart, which symbolizes the soul, he is sent down to Earth to retrieve it. Sapphire has more than an angel trying to take her boy's soul away, but has to deal with fighting against her uncle Duke Doraemon for the throne, an evil witch by the name of Satan who wants Sapphire's girl heart for her daughter, Kate. Sapphire also fights her own feelings for Prince Charming. Ribbon no Kishi was inspired from repeated trips by Tezuka to the Takarazuka Review, which is an all-female kabuki troupe with no male actors, and this was during his childhood. In regards to Princess Sapphire and the setting for Princess Knight, identity and settings spring up again because of the relationship between female readers. Princess Sapphire doesn't necessarily have a true traditional gender, male or female, or identity. She tends to jump in between both, depending on the situation that is at hand. Sapphire uses sword fighting to win against other opponents. When the princess is alone, then she tends to wear pretty dresses and participates in activities fit for females. It is because of this separation of a true female physical body that causes females to connect with Sapphire. The setting itself is based in a fantasy land, not in Japan. This allows females to see themselves as Princess Sapphire and not be associated with Japan. This is a comforting fact because it does not challenge the traditional gender. This is unlike the manga Rose of Versailles, which challenges many roles and eventually leads shoujo manga into a new era after the 1970s. What is the Rose of Versailles? The Rose of Versailles is about two women by the name of Marie Antoinette, who becomes the Queen of France, and Oscar, who is one of the Queen's royal guards. Herself is born female, but is raised as a male. The manga's first arc starts with Marie marrying the Prince of France and interacting with the ladies of the court. When the King of France dies, Marie and her husband become king and queen. Eventually, Marie meets a foreign man by the name of Hans Axel von Fersen. Because Marie can't be with him, she forgets him through buying expensive jewelry and fashion. Since Oscar is a guard in the royal family, she ends up seeing the truth and how the nobility act towards those who are in poverty, and the general struggles for those in poverty. The story ends with the people revolting against the nobility during the French Revolution, and both Oscar and Marie are killed. But what made The Rose of Versailles an inspirational manga? Well, it was due in part to the time when it was published, during the 1970s, when the women's movement was going on. One of the many distinguished leaders of the movement was Mitsu Tanaka. Tanaka and her group, called the Uman Libu, demanded recognition for their self and female sexuality. Tanaka and her group stood against the government's proposed revision of the eugenic protection law. This law allowed Japanese women to have abortions. This was mainly for the effect of preventing the reproduction of an inferior population carrying hereditary diseases. Through the many revisions of the law, many changes occurred, such as the ability to have an abortion when dealing with cases of rape, hereditary illnesses, cases where the mother's life would be threatened by pregnancy or the birth, or if the birth might endanger the health of the mother, both physically or economically. The year 1952 was the last time a revision was made, and it gave women the power to initiate an abortion with an approval from certified physicians. This gave women more power because they could control when they got pregnant if they wanted kids. Through the work of Ryoko Ikeda, that we see a similar advancement in regards to Oscar's identity and place in society. The Rose of Versailles, Oscar sees firsthand the corrupt society in which she lives in. This is because instead of the female sphere, she has access to the male sphere, while Marie herself represents the female sphere and has little knowledge of the outside world outside of fashionable dresses, cosmetics, and children. Like the woodblock printings and Murakami's features, Oscar's graphic image is one that is not overly masculine, but more androgynous. It is because Oscar's gender and sex is not fixed. She is free from bodily constraints. This gives birth to the denial of physicality that was seen in Princess Knight, and altogether is referred to Japanese gross aesthetics. The gross aesthetics rejects the traditional view of women's material bodies that is defined as a tool for producing new children for the country, and romanticizes the unproductive fictional bodies as one of the ways to counter patriarchal social order. Oscar is the figure in The Rose of Versailles who girls identify with because they see themselves unfit for the traditional female role. Another way to identify with the story is through the relationship between Oscar and Andre, because both together in a relationship seems like male homosexuality. But Andre's design is not stereotypically masculine enough. Oscar's final gift towards the female audience is she dies young without bearing children, and that is the true embodiment of girls' aesthetics. In the 1980s, shoujo manga had a change in setting. Where it originally was always in a foreign land, it now predominantly is set in Japan. The genre has been expanded to include what is called ladies' comics, and what led to the development of young ladies' comics. But what are these ladies' comics? Well, the readers of ladies' comics are not younger girls, but adult women or shoujo who are almost adult. Ladies' comics themselves promote two things. The first is to present a woman's desires when they are no longer girls, and the second is to offer alternative role models to adult women. The only limitation for ladies' comics is the fact that they all present the natural goal for a woman is marriage. Unlike The Rose of Versailles, this does not change the identity for Japanese females. Another type of writing that originated from shoujo manga is L literature. L literature itself is not the exact feeling of being a girl shoujo, but it is the mentality of a woman who longs for the stage of girlhood or still holds onto the girl's culture to which she grew up in. In truth, the feeling of L is related to Takahata Iri's consciousness of girls, physically acknowledge themselves as women but refuse to accept the sexual role of women. In regards to manga, we have Creamy Mami, written by Akemi Takada, which is about a girl named Yu, who gains the ability to perform magic from an alien visitor to Earth, and eventually she loses her power. Yu gets discovered by a talent agency and becomes an idol named Mami. This is reminiscent of the equal employment law because it shows a girl who has a job and works for a company. It also represents the clerical career path because Mami can only work during certain times, and at night she changes back into Yu and must stay home. Yu's romantic interest, named Toshiro, has a crush on Mami but doesn't care much for Yu. At the end of the series, Yu loses her magic power and Toshiro realizes his real love. The message from Mami can be summed up as magic does not actually bring about much power, but magic itself serves as an obstacle for the appreciation of the time in a girl's life known as shoujo. The 1990s were an incredible change for the Japanese because of the bursting of the economic bubble. The traditional career path many men followed was now not a guarantee. This could have had an impact on a certain manga that was being created at the time, such as Sailor Moon. The series itself has a teenager named Usagi who is clumsy, lazy, and horrible in school. One day she meets a cat named Luna, and the cat tells her that she has a magical destiny to become Sailor Moon. In the beginning of the series, Sailor Moon is similar to her non-transformed self, Usagi. Later during the first arc, she eventually meets other girls who are like her and transform into Sailor Scouts. These girls themselves are doing the fighting. There are no men to do the fighting, although one does help from time to time. It is mostly the girls who take it upon themselves to stop the evil forces from destroying the Earth. One of the scouts is named Haruka. When she transforms, she is known as Sailor Uranus. Haruka normally dresses as a male, but when she is a scout, she is distinctively female. A particular scene in the manga shows Haruka kissing Usagi, and Usagi responds with, "Are you a guy or a girl?" Haruka simply responds, "Guy or girl? Is that so important?" This causes readers to question the notion of what is male and female. But what about the future? Looking towards new manga that has come out in the 2000s, we see two popular series called Fruits Basket and Hana Yori Dango. Both of these titles have female protagonists that are prettier than the protagonist. And finally, these female protagonists have the maternal connection, and they support. These female protagonists have motherly instincts, and they care for the physical and emotional well-being of the males of the story. These two seem to follow traditional gender roles, but with little changes. So who knows what is in store for the advancement of women in Japan?